Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&As, and in keeping what we've been doing, I'm going to go ahead and put the questions in here and put them down below with timestamps. So let's get to it. First question. Any benefits of taking a full week off the gym for recovery purposes and or nervous system, and how often? No, I'm going to say not at all. If you're serious about gaining strength, gaining muscle, making progress, you shouldn't be taking weeks off from your resistance training. Now, when we talk about deloading for recovery, what you need to understand is that deloading gives you all the recovery benefits that taking a week off does. And it's important that we understand that. Meaning, if you've been squatting, say, 300 pounds for whatever sets and reps, and you drop that down to 150, that's going to be so low relative to your work capacity that it's not really going to be a recovery problem, right? You're going to be able to cope with that really well. But you will re-stimulate some muscle protein synthesis. It will prevent you from detraining and losing the motor patterns. So that's a big part of what we're doing there. So when people talk about taking time off from the gym, no, absolutely not. Taking time off, even if you made progress, like some people are like, well, I take a week off and I come back stronger and I'm recovered. I'm like, yeah, but if you had just deloaded dramatically and just came in and worked with much lighter workloads and brought your total tonnage and your total tension and everything down, you would have made more progress than the week you took off, because you detrain. You detrain during that week. And yeah, sometimes we overreach and we need that deload period, but if you do it correctly, it will give you all the recovery benefits. And that's the point. So no, we absolutely do not want to take weeks off from training. I don't recommend it at all unless you're really sick. Now, if you've got the flu, you're contagious, you have something that's going to make other people sick at the gym, or it's something like that, then you need to just keep yourself in bed. But if you are physically well enough to go to work, then you are well enough to go to the gym and deload if you have to. So you're still better off for it. All right, next question. With the new research being put out by Dr. Brad Schoenfeld about some isolation exercises hitting muscles differently than compounds, will it have any effects on future training regimens for you, or does it pose no validity? Well, here's what we have to look at with this. And I'm going to say this nicely because I like Dr. Brad. Dr. Brad does have some financial interest in what he promotes, meaning he's promoted a lot of books. And if all his research came out later and showed that a lot of the stuff he's putting in books is going to be a problem, he might have his own personal bias as far as what he chooses to research and how to conduct it. And that doesn't mean that he's ripping anyone off, and I want people to understand that with bias. Oftentimes our financial bias, or the financial bias of someone who is a researcher, can be subconscious, meaning it's not even necessarily them saying, oh, I don't want to discredit my own work. It's that they have a tendency to believe in what they've already done and where their money is, and so subconsciously they may avoid research or variables that could disprove that. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad researcher, it's just that there's bias there. And people need to understand that. That's not a negative statement. That's a fact. Every human being on earth has bias towards things, including researchers. And understanding that could put that in perspective. Now, that being said, does it matter if it hits them differently? I mean, we know that a concentration curl or a barbell curl hits your biceps differently than a lat pull down. Is that correct? Yeah, we all agree with that. Do we have any studies showing that people who do sufficient volume with lat pull downs gain less muscle than people who do a curl instead? No, we don't. The people in the studies, when we study them for 8 to 10 weeks on the lat pull down, they gain just as much muscle in their bicep as a curl. We all agree the curl hits the bicep differently. It even lights it up differently on the EMG. But that doesn't ensure that there's going to be more muscle growth. And that's the take home. That's what we need to remember. Just because it works it differently doesn't mean it's going to grow more. And that's kind of the point of what I've pointed out with all the data out there. And people say, well, that's your bias. No, it's not my bias. I pimped curls for years. I did curls for years. I put curls and tricep extensions in my programs, right? The research is telling me at this point that that was a big ass waste of time, that I was wrong. That's what the research is telling me. That's why I don't do isolation work anymore. The research has told me, from what I've seen, looking at it objectively, that isolation movements are largely a waste of my time and your time. Not saying they're bad, it's just that we get more out of compounds. And isolation movements don't seem to add any extra muscle growth in any of the data I've looked at. And even if you do produce one study saying otherwise, you've got to carry that against the weight of all the other studies. By itself, one study wouldn't be enough to unseat that. That's just not how it works. So that is what it is. No, and until we get a very substantial amount of data that can outweigh the other data, no, my stance isn't going to change. I've got to go with what the data shows, and the data seems to match at this point my real world experience because I've done it the other way. And it just wasn't that effective. All right, next question. Hey coach, how long do you plan on training the way you do at the moment? Is it sustainable in the long term, or will you eventually go back to a traditional split with multiple sets, higher volume, upper lower split, body days kept separate? Thanks. I plan on doing it long term. This is the way that I loved training when I had a home gym before in the UK. I haven't been in a situation until very recently to where this was even an option for me. Now that it is and it's on the table and I can manage my lifestyle around it, this is what I plan on doing indefinitely. Now, does that mean that I won't maybe on occasion do some higher volume phases and then come back to it? I can't say that I won't. There might be a need for that. I think I can get sufficient hypertrophy without it, but that's not certain. I'm going to need to run it out and see what I need to do there, right? But just because, let's say we spend half the year switching to other stuff and we spend 6 months out of every year using a specific type of training protocol, doesn't mean that we aren't still using that training protocol. Keep that in mind. People do different phases of their training throughout the year, no matter what they compete in or what their goals are. That's not uncommon. Now, that being said, there are people who've run this style of training out long term who are already pretty strong, who continue to get stronger. Like Greg Nuckols, I think he said over the course of years added 300 pounds to his total slowly without stopping production, like without really not seeing progress at least every few months, doing this for years, something like this, and it worked great for him. Guys like Max Adia, who did the real Bulgarian thing for Olympic lifting, he did it for many years nonstop. So yeah, it's totally doable in the long term. Now, it doesn't mean I might not occasionally rotate some other phases in, but yeah, ideally I'd like to run this out long term. I might be doing it for years. We'll see how it goes. All right, next question. How can someone program barbell complexes if they're doing a full body 3 days a week? I would like to do them on my off days since twice a week. And do you aim for progression on the barbell complexes over time? Thank you, Jason. Oh, absolutely you aim for progression. Everything is progressive overload. That's the key to adaptation. Even though you're doing them for conditioning, there's a hypertrophy component to barbell complexes, not just a fat burning and a stamina and conditioning component. What I would say, though, if you're doing true full body 3 days a week, you're going to need to incorporate them very slowly and gradually, because if you're running a legitimate, well-written full body 3 day a week program, that is going to probably be taking up most of your recovery. So how do you work them in? Rotate them in with one cycle at first. In other words, start with a weight that you can finish up one complete rotation of your complexes. And you could literally add, every week you could add another rotation till you get to around 5. So let's say you're doing 5 or 6 different exercises, you're doing 6 rep sets, get to where you can do 5 full complexes. Then once you're there, you microload it. And I mean, you take a good minute between them, because it's almost a form of HIIT cardio. It really is. Then you start microloading. You could add 2.5 pounds here, 2.5 pounds there. You can get micro plates. You could do 5-pound jumps depending on what you're able to do. And over time, you can increase progression on them, right? And that's the whole point, because you'll end up doing 30 reps of each of the exercises each time you do them. Again, 5, 6, 7 different exercises, and that's how you progress, just like with anything else, gradual progression. It's that simple. But you're going to have to watch your recovery. All right, next question. Thoughts on the effect of calories for those trying to reap out the newbie gains, doing about 1,700 a day, 170 pounds with a ratio of 40-40-20, carbs, protein, fat, and frankly, after the first few months, it seems like the numbers have barely risen anymore. Full body 5x5 program, any feedback is appreciated. Brother, Unless you are a 110-pound woman, there is no way in hell you are going to make progress on that amount of food on a full body 5x5 program. Like, it's not even remotely imaginable. In fact, you're saying after the first few months, I'm surprised you made gains after the first month. Like, I'm literally surprised. Like, that's actually a testament to your potential. You are probably very genetically gifted in certain ways to have made any progress on that food intake beyond the first 4 weeks, like at all. No, you need to eat. Also, why are you tracking percentages like that? No one tracks percentages, at least in the sports nutrition world like that with that 40-40-20 stuff. It's 1,700 calories. I'm surprised that you're making any progress on less than 2,500. And in all honesty, you need to probably be working yourself up towards 3,000 calories a day. Start working your calories back up. Go to about 2,500. Keep your fat nice and low. Eat plenty. Add extra carbs. Your protein's probably fine. Add more carbs in. Your lifts will start going up. You will start gaining muscle. And I seriously doubt if you're training hard, doing a legitimate 5x5 with progressive overload, and you eat a fairly low-fat diet, I very seriously doubt that on 2,500 calories you're going to gain any body fat. And every time your weight gain stalls, you're going to need to up your calories further. You need to be gaining at least 1 pound of body weight every single month, minimum. That's your bare minimum. Some people would argue closer to 3 or 4 might be ideal. But you're absolutely not going to finish out your newbie gains on 107 or 1,700 calories, and you're not obese. If you were really obese, maybe, but you're 170 pounds, you need to eat more. You're going to end up developing an eating disorder trying to do what you're doing if you are not already there. Up the calories, 2,500 minimum, and start adding more. You need to be working towards 3,000. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.